This woman, clinging to the crown prince all day, fawning over him, her goal is his body. Once she's had her fill, she'll discard him. And the chaste crown prince, finally melted by a woman, has his hardened heart stolen along with his virginity. The woman, sated, watches the sleeping prince beside her, lightly tracing his thigh with her toes. When the crown prince awakens, he'll discover that he and the woman he shared the night with have swapped bodies. What a horrified expression he'll have. Irene narrowed her eyes in anticipation. Soon, the man's eyes snapped open. He rubbed his short hair, revealing the expected look of shock. Indeed, their bodies had been swapped. Who could have imagined? The man now possessed a woman's soul. He slowly rose, stretching his powerful muscles, feeling an indescribable invigoration. This man's physique was incredible, so energetic after an entire night of exertion. Irene, satisfied, draped a robe around herself, staring at the body on the bed that had once been hers. Irene lifted a strand of the woman's hair. Let you experience how sore you feel after being so thoroughly used. Irene couldn't be blamed for her seeming heartlessness. In the original story, her family, for failing to cure the crown prince's illness, were accused of treason and executed. No one knew the prince was cursed, not something simple herbs could cure. After transmigrating, Irene knew only an antidote could save the crown prince. But administering the magic potion at the same time for 15 consecutive days was no easy task. Moreover, this paranoid crown prince had a deep fear of magic. So, to save herself and her family, Irene had to seize his body and administer the potion herself. Though she went to such lengths to lift his curse, she wouldn't hear a single word of thanks. But enjoying the crown prince's body was reward enough. Surrounded by servants, Irene walked out of the castle. A carrier pigeon with a red ribbon tied to its leg flew towards them. The red ribbon signified a serious illness within the royal family. While the servants fearfully speculated whether Empress Alice had fallen ill, Irene's eyes remained calm. This was false news she herself had orchestrated. Her goal was to escape. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Unbeknownst to her, on the bed, the body-swap crown prince forced himself up, his body aching. Just as he wondered why he felt so unwell, the mirror reflected a beautiful woman's face. The crown prince, after having his way with the woman, heartlessly left the bedchamber. The surrounding servants didn't notice their crown prince had changed. Inside was the woman's soul. The crown prince sneered internally, "You always look down on me. Now you can experience what it's like to be the woman you so despise." Irene squeezed her ample chest with satisfaction. Unexpectedly, this guy's assets are quite impressive. Last night had been quite the feast for the senses. Just then, a servant reminded her about the gift from Miss Chandler, which had been given to the maidservant. At the mention of that, Irene couldn't help but laugh self-deprecatingly. This crown prince often regifted unwanted presents from other ladies. Now, such a gift was in her hands. He must find it quite absurd. At the window, unnoticed by Irene, the body-swap crown prince, Derry, was pounding on the window. He saw his own body standing there. He instantly realized he and Irene had swapped bodies. Rage and helplessness consumed him. Derry, unable to support himself, slid to the floor. The next moment, panicked maids rushed to help him up. To comfort him, the maids loudly condemned the heartless crown prince who had used and abandoned Irene, unaware that the crown prince himself was standing right before them, hearing every word. He glanced at the two maids, silently thinking that his heartless actions were nothing compared to Irene's. He had woken up alone in the empty bed, still reeling from the body swap. He hadn't expected her to just leave him there. The thought filled Derry with a sense of aggrieved resentment. He forced himself to get used to Irene's higher-pitched voice, mimicking her tone to dismiss the servants. He sat down on the sofa, rubbing his temples in frustration. He couldn't understand why Irene had done this. Could it be that one night together was all she wanted? Derry angrily swept the ornate gift box off the table. Sparkling jewels spilled from the shattered box. Derry stared at the gems, his eyes blazing. He had even prepared this to propose to Irene. Had she only wanted his body from the very beginning? The Empire's most beautiful woman had been staring at the mirror for 48 hours straight. The maidservants speculated that she had gone mad from being abandoned by the crown prince. They didn't know the woman before them was the crown prince himself. He gazed resentfully at the stunning face in the mirror, still unable to believe the woman who had seemed so devoted to him had only been after his body. Derry caressed the captivating face in the mirror, lost in memories. As a child, he had been sent to an enemy nation as a hostage by his own parents. There, the young Derry had survived countless assassination attempts and kidnappings. Almost every night, servants attending him lost their lives. From that moment, he finally understood. Only by becoming powerful could he protect those around him. So he concealed all his emotions, forging himself into the strongest weapon, ultimately returning to the Empire as a hero. Yet all his strength crumbled before Irene. He clearly remembered the first time he saw Irene. She bowed her proud head, her delicate face like a rose blooming at midnight. Any callow youth would have been set ablaze by her. But Derry merely observed her. Her eyes were full of calculation. This woman, as rich and intoxicating as fine wine, with countless men kneeling at her feet, was deliberately approaching him. Intense curiosity drove Derry to learn more about her. It was a rainy day. The downpour was so heavy. It soaked Derry to the bone. As if by fate's design, the woman who had occupied his thoughts for days appeared in the same pavilion. Irene tucked her wet hair behind her ear, revealing her pale neck. Timidly, she asked, "I'm truly afraid of the rain. Your Majesty, could you perhaps warm me?" Derry suppressed the urge to press his lips against her neck and heartlessly left in the pouring rain. This woman wants to be crowned princess, he thought. I won't let her succeed. After that, Irene found various excuses to be near him. Derry was initially annoyed by her persistence, but when he saw her holding white roses, passionately declaring her love, he suddenly thought, what's a crown princess title, anyway? I can give it to her. The crown prince, who had struggled through life in the mire, finally and willingly fell. But he never expected that the girl he loved, for whom he lowered all his defenses, only wanted his body from the start. Derry, forcing his postcoital body upright, wanted to confront Irene and demand an explanation. But the stinging pain down below prevented him from even reaching the door. Surrounded by maids attending to him, Derry blushed. Had he been so unrestrained last night? The whole city was gossiping about how the crown prince had taken the empire's most beautiful woman and then run away. But they didn't know that the one who ran was actually the beauty after the body swap. And the so-called heartless crown prince they spoke of was lying in bed, resentfully enduring the postcoital aches. I won't let this woman, who stole my body and ran, get away with this, he fumed. After sharing such a night, marriage should be the next step, Derry thought angrily. How do I stop Irene's plan? First step, get my body back. But how did Irene steal my body? Derry pictured the woman, vibrant as a wild rose. Was it because we slept together? If so, the solution is simple. Just sleep with her again. The thought of that passionate night made Derry's heart race. He moved to the mirror, only to be startled by the red marks and bruises covering his body. He had tried to be gentle last night. He hadn't realized Irene's body was so fragile. Or was it? Derry gritted his teeth, unwilling to accept the alternative. Was I the only one who lost control? Irene had no idea that the usually domineering crown prince was now fretting like a lovesick maiden. She sat on Derry's throne, playing his role. Having been constantly by Derry's side, she knew his habits and mannerisms well. As long as she wasn't discovered by his close aides, she would be fine. Just then, a trusted aide addressed her. Your Highness, may I offer a suggestion? Irene's heart sank. Had this old fox seen through her disguise? She listened as Qing Shing spoke softly. I've been observing you. Your Highness, you seem to have not slept well. Perhaps you should return to your chambers to rest. Looking at the teary-eyed Qing Shing, Irene breathed a sigh of relief. Her identity was safe for now. Then, she instructed the aide to fetch a specific book. Irene had tampered with it. It was the only one of its kind in the entire room. Hidden within its pages was a packet of medicine. Once the aide returned with the book, Irene could retrieve it without anyone noticing. She hadn't expected lifting Derry's curse to be so complicated. But in just 15 days, she would be free, and her family spared from the horrific fate of execution. When her brothers learned their precious sister had been mistreated by the crown prince, they furiously boarded up the palace gates, vowing that the crown prince would kneel and apologize to their sister. They were completely unaware that the sister they were so fiercely protective of was, in fact, the crown prince himself. Derry impatiently endured his brothers, clinging to him like puppies. One offered him the finest court tea, the other a hand-sewn teddy bear, both trying their best to cheer their sister up. But Derry, the object of their affections, was going mad. His brothers, fearing their sister's loneliness, spent every moment with him. and every day they would kiss Derry on the cheek. Mortified, Derry would scrub his face furiously after they left, as if trying to erase the contact. If his brothers knew they were actually showering affection on the Crown Prince's soul, would they storm the palace in a rage? He glanced sideways at the small teddy bear. How could Irene possibly like something like this? The bear's soft, innocent expression was far too reminiscent of Irene's own coquettish charm. Infuriated, Derry swatted the bear across the room. Derry rose and walked to the mirror, gazing at his own face. While Irene's appearance was undeniably pleasing, surely even that would become tiresome after a millennium of constant viewing. With a touch of disdain, Derry caressed the face that had once captivated him. He absolutely would not let this woman, who had so thoroughly used him, get away with this humiliation. He had been completely taken advantage of by Irene. He absolutely had to get his body back first, and then force her to marry him. Currently, only Irene knew the secret of the body swap, but she consistently rejected his requests for a meeting. With no other option, Derry decided to investigate himself. He imagined confronting her with irrefutable evidence, watching her beautiful face crumple in panic as he demanded to know why she had done this. Perhaps she would even be willing to make amends, to do something to rectify the situation, like becoming the crown princess. Lost in blissful fantasy, a blushing Derry slipped into Irene's study and began searching. Suddenly, his hand brushed against a button on the upper shelves. With a clang, a hidden compartment sprang open. It was clearly the hiding place for some shocking secret. Derry smirked. This was it. He pulled out the hidden book, gleefully flipping it open. He was already picturing what wedding dress Irene would wear on their big day. But the moment his eyes fell on the pages, the smile froze on his face. The book was filled with drawings of scantily clad, alluring men. Their poses were so bold and provocative that Derry's face darkened. Furious, he slammed the book shut and threw it to the floor. He couldn't believe that a dignified duchess would enjoy such greasy men. Derry subconsciously puffed out his chest. None of them had a physique that could compare to his. The crown prince, having swapped bodies with the woman of his affections, was just about to engage in some intimate activities when, inexplicably, his body switched back. Derry abruptly sat up in bed, finding himself back in his own chambers. He instinctively ran his hand over his 8-pack abs. The hard feel of his muscles confirmed it. He was back in his own body. But wasn't another night, together, the only way to reverse the swap? How had Irene managed this? Across the city, Irene, having finally enjoyed a good night's sleep, stretched luxuriously. During the 15 days she had occupied Derry's body, she had diligently administered his medicine, finally succeeding in lifting the curse. Although Derry was completely unaware of her efforts, saving her family was reward enough for Irene. She pinched her unblemished skin. Considering Derry's forceful nature, she had expected to find significant marks on her body. Not only were there none, but not even her personal maids had suspected a thing. It seemed she had played the role of Irene quite convincingly. She hadn't expected this cold, aloof tiger to actually be such a considerate kitten at heart. Later that afternoon, impeccably dressed, Irene attended a tea party. Her family, initially scolding the supposedly philandering crown prince, immediately brightened upon seeing her and warmly invited her to join them. Her father, seeing his daughter, who had been shut away for 15 days, finally back to normal, was moved to tears. As her brothers recounted embarrassing childhood stories, Irene basked in the warmth of her family. All her sacrifices had been worth it to protect them. But the warm atmosphere was shattered by an urgent announcement from a palace messenger. Crown Prince Derry had summoned Irene to the palace. Her family was indignant. After abandoning Irene, the crown prince now had the audacity to summon her. Her father was about to explode, but Irene gently took his hand. With a reassuring smile, she promised to return quickly. Irene had been prepared for this. In truth, she had been anticipating this moment. As she stepped out of her carriage, she saw Derry waiting for her, a frown etched on his face. Irene offered her usual sweet smile, her heart surprisingly calm, even expectant. Derry's reaction was exactly as she had predicted. Her plan was reaching its climax. The crown prince, used and discarded by a woman, woke up to find himself in the body of the very woman who had wronged him. Putting the pieces together, he had guessed that the body swap was all her doing. But he could never have imagined that she had done it to save his life. Now, Derry led Irene to a secluded part of the garden, his voice cold as he demanded, "Duchess, what have you done to my body?" Irene simply stared at him, her gaze so piercing that Derry felt a pang in his chest. She had always greeted him with a smile. Why was she looking at him with such an unfamiliar expression now? Irene turned away, claiming she didn't know what had happened. Derry, of course, didn't believe this flimsy lie. His face darkened, his eyes blazing. Any reasonable person, he seethed, would have come to me the moment they realized our bodies had been swapped. But you left me alone on that island after what happened. Looking at Derry, his face full of wronged/aggrieved, ranting at her like a neglected wife, Irene was stunned. Why was he being so emotional today? But Irene had anticipated this question. A messenger arrived with a dark red ribbon tied to its leg. She replied smoothly, echoing the pre-prepared excuse. "That signifies a serious illness befalling your mother. I had to return immediately." Of course, there was no such illness. Irene had orchestrated the entire charade. Watching her flawless performance, Derry clenched his fists in frustration. "You've been avoiding me for the past 2 weeks," he pressed, refusing any contact. "What explanation do you have for that?" The true answer, to save you, remained unspoken on Irene's lips. She looked at the handsome face before her, contorted with a mixture of hurt and anger. Perhaps this was the last time she would see him up close. Steeling herself, Irene delivered the words that shattered Derry's heart into 520 pieces. "I no longer love you, Your Highness." Derry reeled, unable to believe those words had come from her. His reaction ignited a flicker of annoyance in Irene. "While I was chasing after you, you acted so indifferent. Now you regret it," she thought, fuming inwardly. She twisted the knife further. "After I had you," she declared coldly, "I grew tired of it." Derry's pupils contracted, his expression a mask of heartbreak and despair. Irene suddenly felt like a heartless villain, a wave of guilt washing over her. She turned abruptly to leave, but Derry's voice stopped her. "Then why," he asked, his voice barely a whisper, "did you always follow me?" Without turning back, Irene replied softly, "I thought that one day, Your Highness, you might show me a gentle smile. But I'm tired of your coldness," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "Tired of pretending to be happy, accepting gifts that other ladies rejected." Indeed, Irene was exhausted from the charade of loving Derry. Now that she had successfully used his body and saved her family, she could finally withdraw. This supporting female character was busier than the heroine. One moment, she was discarding her bored lover. The next, the heroine's brother was confessing his undying love. A rustling sound emanated from the bushes. A handsome knight, his cheeks flushed crimson, emerged. It was Pierre, Irene's childhood friend. Pierre, so shy he could barely meet her eyes, stammered a greeting. His innocent, puppy-like demeanor made Irene chuckle. During the body swap, Pierre had repeatedly confronted Derry, demanding to know why he had abandoned Irene. It was hard to believe that this gentle soul was capable of such fierce protectiveness. Pierre, of course, had no idea that the heartless individual who had callously discarded her lover was actually Irene. Meanwhile, the discarded crown prince, Derry, was desperately searching for her. Even though Irene had rejected him, he still wanted to give her his proposal gift. He finally spotted her through the trees. Just as he was about to call her name, the sight before him choked the proposal back down his throat. Pierre, summoning all his courage, gazed at Irene with adoration. "Would you," he asked, his voice trembling, "be my partner at the birthday banquet?" He was so nervous his heart pounded audibly. Irene, a playful smile on her face, told him she needed time to consider. Pierre, ecstatic that she hadn't outright refused, urged her to take her time. He would, he declared, refuse all other invitations, reserving the coveted spot solely for her. A voice, laced with barely suppressed fury, cut through the air. "The seventh Knights have plenty of free time, it seems." Derry emerged from the trees, his face a thundercloud. Irene and Pierre hastily bowed. Sensing Derry's displeasure, Pierre tactfully excused himself, but not before reminding Irene of their agreement. The casual intimacy was like another stab to Derry's heart. Arms crossed, Derry tapped his fingers impatiently. "Irene," he said, his voice tight, "I think we need to talk." Irene suspected he wanted to discuss the curse again, but she was done playing his game. After a dramatic pause, glistening tears began to trickle down her cheeks. She sobbed softly, a picture of vulnerability. The Empire's most vibrant wild rose, for the first time, appeared utterly fragile. Derry's carefully prepared words evaporated. The sight of Irene's tear-streaked face was a dagger to his heart. He turned away, unable to push further. The Crown Prince, publicly rejected, was bewildered. He had believed their intimate night meant they were destined to be together. He hadn't imagined she was merely playing a game. When he confronted her, his sharp mind recognized the falseness of her tears. Yet, even knowing this, the sight of her crying softened his anger. He still couldn't bring himself to give her the intended proposal gift. As he fiddled with it, a subordinate entered, bearing tea and a fawning smile. During their time, in each other's bodies, Irene had cleverly disguised Derry's medicine by mixing it into his tea. Unaware of this, Derry saw only a weakness he could exploit. Irene, who never drank tea, had suddenly developed a fondness for it during the body swap. Something was definitely amiss. A wicked grin spread across his face. He scheduled a full medical examination, drawing a vial of blood. He would discover what she had ingested during those 15 days. Derry suspected she had consumed some sort of poisonous herbal concoction after stealing his body. How would he punish her? The thought of Irene, the woman who had stolen his first night. Derry pictured Irene's delicate face, contorted with a pleading expression, and a triumphant smirk spread across his own. Perhaps the perfect punishment is to make her stay with me forever. News of the Crown Prince's full medical examination reached Irene quickly. The person conducting the blood analysis was her older brother. Irene was shocked. Derry was sharper than she'd anticipated. He'd sensed something was amiss almost immediately upon returning to his own body. The herbal remedy she'd given him to lift the curse did have traceable components. While intended as an antidote, if it was discovered that she'd given the Crown Prince potentially poisonous herbs, she could be executed for treason. But Irene had foreseen this possibility. As a precaution, on the last day of the body swap, she had ingested a tea that neutralized the toxins. The blood test would reveal the presence of harmless herbs, but not their original purpose. A thrill of excitement coursed through Irene as she contemplated her flawless plan. Derry was no match for her. As expected, Derry's blood work came back normal. The result surprised him. Still suspicious, he casually inquired about the medicine he had been consistently taking. To his surprise, a detailed record existed. The royal physician's face paled as he read the entry. Seeing the physician trembling, barely able to hold the ledger, Derry's heart sank. He ordered the man to tell him the truth immediately. The physician, struggling to contain his laughter, finally blurted out, "Your Highness, the herbs you were taking. They have invigorating properties, beneficial for the men." Derry's eyes widened. Then his face crumpled as if struck by lightning. Humiliation washed over him. So, Irene had left him because he hadn't satisfied her. The physically imposing Crown Prince, questioned in his abilities by the woman he'd shared a bed with, and she'd even dosed his body with performance-enhancing herbs. Derry's face darkened. A wave of crushing disappointment surged through him. Irene had rejected him because of that. His masculine pride had been trampled beneath the feet of the woman he loved. He hung his head in despair. But if Irene wanted to leave him, why had she continued to consume those beneficial for men teas for 2 weeks after the body swap? Derry's mind raced. Did she still have feelings for him? No, it's a taunt, he thought, desperately pushing away the hopeful thought. He clenched his fists. He'd given her his precious first time, naively believing that intimacy meant they were destined to be together. The humiliation burned. He snatched the medical ledger, crumpled it into a ball, and stormed out of the palace. He wouldn't tolerate this blow to his pride, this unceremonious rejection. Just you wait, Irene. Irene's brother, the royal physician, naturally relayed the entire incident to her. He expected her to be amused, but instead, she froze, the smile vanishing from her face. She had been so focused on neutralizing the poison, she hadn't considered the other effects of the remaining herbs. She had only wanted to lift Derry's curse, not insult him in this way. He must be furious. But strangely, Irene felt a pang of guilt herself. Her brother, however, misinterpreted her downcast expression as lingering affection for the scoundrel Crown Prince. He cupped her face, gently scolding her for being upset over such a man. He couldn't bear to see his sister heartbroken. Determined to erase Derry from her memory, he declared he would find her 10 suitable suitors. A new romance, he insisted, was the best cure for a broken heart. Irene, feeling like a trapped bird, quickly agreed. Once she'd managed to appease her overprotective brother, Irene breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the air behind her. It was Derry. Irene ushered him into the garden, her mind racing. He was here about the medical examination, she realized. She would have to be careful. But Derry's first words caught her off guard. That night, he began, his voice strained. Was it? Irene averted her gaze, acutely aware of a man's sensitivity about such matters. The crown prince, poisoned by the woman he'd shared a bed with, was most concerned with her experience of that night. It wasn't that Derry was overly sensitive. The blood test had revealed that during the 2 weeks they were swapped, Irene had been dosing his body with male enhancement herbs. The humiliation of having his virility questioned by the woman he loved overshadowed everything else. Irene, put on the spot, couldn't help but recall the passionate encounter. While Derry had been a bit inexperienced, overall, it had been quite enjoyable. But how could she possibly admit that? Swallowing her amusement, she feigned innocence. I don't understand why you think I left you because of that, she replied, her voice carefully neutral. Derry flushed, mortified at having so readily given up his virginity, especially since he had been the one seduced. Seeing Derry's indignant expression, Irene felt a twinge of guilt. She had deliberately schemed to take over his body. Regardless of your intentions, Derry continued, his voice tight, the fact remains that you stole my body and poisoned me. Irene's expression darkened. If exposed, she could face serious consequences. But Derry wouldn't dare reveal the truth publicly. The people wouldn't support a ruler who had been subjected to a body-swapping spell. Exposing the incident would be mutually destructive. So why was Derry making these empty threats? He was fumbling in his pocket, and Irene instinctively recoiled. Was he so enraged that he intended to harm her? Just as that thought crossed her mind, Derry's hand shot out toward her. Irene raised her arm defensively, bracing for the impact, but the expected pain never came. Instead of a blow, Irene found herself staring at a necklace bearing the royal crest, dangling before her eyes. It was the very engagement gift Derry had been yearning to give her. Derry blushed crimson, unable to meet her gaze. Irene, he mumbled, just consider this a transaction. You toyed with my affections. In exchange, accept this gift and become my crown princess. Irene's eyes widened. This man, whom she had poisoned and whose manhood she had questioned, was still insistent on marrying her. She firmly refused him. What she truly desired wasn't status or power, but genuine love. Derry panicked at her rejection. He assumed she was refusing him because he hadn't satisfied her that night. He placed a hand on her shoulder, leaning in to whisper, let's try again. This time, I promise you'll be satisfied. Hades loved no one but his sister, his obsession bordering on madness. Yet he suppressed his near uncontrollable desires, feigning the innocence of a devoted puppy. He clung to Irene's side, even letting her stroke his hair. As a reward, Hades nuzzled against Irene's leg like a playful dog. He had deliberately worn her favorite perfume, and Irene recognized it instantly. She poked his cheek lightly. Next time you visit, she warned, try to be a little more restrained. Irene didn't want any scandalous rumors circulating. Hades' eyes flashed with a sudden intensity, quickly masked by a sigh. He no longer wanted to be treated like a child. He was a grown man, and he preened himself like a peacock, hoping she'd notice. But Irene remained oblivious to Hades' subtle cues. She idly played with her fingernails, her mind elsewhere. This young man, whom she had supported since childhood, would become the heroine's most trusted ally in the original story. Irene had taken the initiative, befriending him while he was still a homeless waif. She had successfully brought him into her fold, helping him build the Empire's largest underground network. Even the recent incident with the Crown Prince's medication wouldn't have been possible without Hades' assistance. Hades warned Irene of recent stirrings within the royal court, likely concerning the selection of a crown princess. Irene thought of the crown prince, whom she had repeatedly rejected, and asked Hades to keep an ear out for any unfavorable rumors circulating among the commoners. Hades blinked his innocent, wide eyes. Can I eliminate those who speak ill of you? He couldn't bear the thought of anyone slandering his sister. No one should bully her. Anyone who dared should have their tongue ripped out. But Irene refused Hades' offer. She could handle those who crossed her herself. She didn't want her younger brother's hands stained with blood. Meanwhile, Crown Prince Derry sat at his desk, reviewing the official documents Irene had completed for him while they were swapped. Her work was impeccable, leaving him no room for criticism. This woman truly was perfect for him in every way. But why had she rejected him? Derry slumped back in his chair, despondent. Just then, his rival, Pierre, entered, reporting on matters concerning the knights. Derry, unable to bear the sight of him for another second, quickly dismissed him. But he immediately regretted it. He desperately wanted to know if Irene had agreed to be Pierre's partner for the upcoming ball. Pierre, eyes twinkling, confirmed his worst fears. "Yes, Your Highness. Lady Irene and I will be attending the ball together." The woman who had once pursued him relentlessly was now gone. Panic seized Derry. He tried everything to rekindle her interest, but nothing worked. She wouldn't look back. Learning of her decision to attend the royal banquet with someone else sent Derry into a rage unlike any he'd experienced, even when facing mortal danger. Irene had claimed to be waiting for true love, yet she'd moved on so quickly. Derry glared at Pierre. Why him? He seethed. Through their conversation, he learned that Irene and Pierre were childhood friends. Derry's expression grew increasingly stormy. He knew Pierre was popular. Whenever he trained in the field, girls would flock to him, vying to wipe his brow. But Derry couldn't understand. Both Pierre and that jeweler, Hades, were thin as rails. How could they compare to his physique? What did Irene see in them? He glanced at Pierre dismissively. If he couldn't satisfy Irene, Pierre certainly couldn't. Derry puffed out his broad chest, a futile display of bravado. Despite his attempts at self-assurance, he remained deeply troubled. The thought of Irene bestowing the same tender gaze she once reserved for him upon Pierre filled him with an unbearable ache. The more he looked at Pierre, the more irritated he became. Finally, he resorted to pulling rank, only realizing the childishness of his actions after Pierre had left. That woman, Irene, had a strange power over him, making him act out of character. Derry rubbed his temples in frustration. Irene was oblivious to the two men vying for her attention. On the day of the emperor's birthday banquet, she appeared before Pierre in a stunning red gown, leaving him speechless. Irene was pleased with his reaction. She took his hand, preparing to board the carriage. But as their hands touched, she noticed a slight tremor in his. Was he nervous about accompanying her? Irene offered him a reassuring smile. Truthfully, she didn't love Pierre. However, his social standing and family background made him a suitable match. She was willing to give him a chance. Inside the banquet hall, all eyes were on the dazzling couple. Beautiful people, it seemed, always commanded attention. A noblewoman, however, scoffed. Everyone knew of Irene's shameless pursuit of the crown prince. It seemed she had finally accepted that she would never be crown princess. Now she's settling for being a countess. The noblewoman's voice carried across the hall, loud enough for everyone to hear. Pierre bristled, about to confront the gossiping woman, but Irene stopped him. Irene enjoyed the feeling of crushing her enemies personally. She had once been known as a desperate clinger, publicly proclaiming she couldn't live without a man. However, she had since seen the light. Men were nothing but stumbling blocks on her path to success. Even Pierre, her current escort, was chosen out of familial obligation. Just then, Lilia, Pierre's younger sister, approached them with a bright smile. But the moment she saw Irene, she froze. Irene had often kept Lilia at arm's length, not out of dislike, but because she was the heroine of the original story. To save her family from their destined downfall, Irene had felt she needed to compete with Lilia. But now, having lifted Derry's curse, she no longer saw Lilia as a rival. Besides, Lilia was undeniably beautiful, stirring a protective instinct in Irene. So, Irene initiated a conversation. Lilia, utterly surprised by Irene's friendly gesture, pinched herself to see if she was dreaming. This adorable reaction charmed Irene, who didn't love a sweet, innocent girl. With the misunderstanding cleared, the two chatted animatedly. Irene, having assumed Lilia had a crush on the crown prince, clarified her lack of romantic interest in Derry. She encouraged Lilia to pursue her love bravely. To her surprise, Lilia leaned in and whispered that she was actually a fan of Irene and the crown prince as a couple. Lilia glanced nervously around, afraid her brother, Pierre, might overhear. Irene, taken aback by this unexpected revelation, could only manage a wry smile. The heroine of the original story was a shipper of the male lead and the supposed villainess. Had the flap of her butterfly wings caused such a significant change? Lilia, with a dreamy expression, glanced towards the crown prince. His Highness is looking at you with such tender eyes, she whispered. Irene met Derry's gaze. He looked particularly dashing tonight. Was there someone he was trying to impress? Perhaps Lilia was the one he truly desired. After all, he often gave Irene Lilia's unwanted gifts. The thought of Derry irritated her. As the music began, she prepared to join Pierre on the dance floor. Suddenly, Derry, as if possessed, leaped from his throne and grabbed Irene's hand. The first dance he declared as mine. He had been watching Irene intently for half an hour, unable to bear the sight of her with another man. The room erupted in murmurs. Irene was equally stunned. When she had pursued him relentlessly, he had rejected her every advance. Now, he was not only asking her to dance, but also making a scene by stealing another man's partner. Gazing at Derry's handsome face, Irene's mind raced. She, a noble duchess, had once chased after him like a lovesick puppy. The cold and indifferent prince had finally succumbed to her charms, even secretly preparing a necklace for a proposal. Yet, after sleeping with him, she had cruelly cast him aside. What's a crown prince? She had scoffed. Mere just clothes. I can change them every day if I please. And now, she stood before him, arm in arm with her current suitor. A flicker of pain crossed Derry's usually impassive face. He glanced down at his meticulously chosen attire, meant to impress Irene. Now, he felt like a fool, forced to watch the woman who once smiled only at him dance in another man's embrace. As the music ended, a swarm of men rushed forward, eager to dance with Irene. Derry, as her ex, had no grounds to intervene. Just then, a commotion arose at the entrance. It was the second in line to the throne. The Grand Duke, an older man who had always been at odds with the Crown Prince. Intending to introduce his own companion to Derry, the Grand Duke was surprised when Derry pointed to Irene and declared haughtily, "I only dance with her." Trapped in a difficult situation, Irene had no choice but to accept. She placed her hand in the Grand Duke's with a smile, but then proceeded to dig her nails into his fingers, causing him such pain that he nearly saw stars. He endured it silently. "Why are you pinching me?" Derry asked, bewildered. "Do you not want to dance with me?" His question struck a nerve. Maintaining a flawless facade, Irene retorted, "You always refuse when I ask you to dance. I assumed your Highness disliked dancing." Derry's expression darkened. "How dare you blame me?" He huffed. He almost blurted out, "You're too beautiful. I had to stay away or I wouldn't be able to control myself, but..." Irene interrupted him with another misunderstanding. "Didn't you always hate physical contact with me?" Derry froze. Then, with a look of deep sincerity, explained, "I never said I hated physical contact with you." Still misinterpreting him, Irene offered a resigned smile. "Your Highness," she said, "I'm not so foolish as to need reminding of how much someone dislikes me. I know that even the slightest touch from me makes you shudder." Derry's gaze darted around nervously. A shameful secret kept him from revealing the true reason he avoided her touch. Before he could decide whether to confess, the music started, interrupting their conversation. Can a broken heart be mended? As the man before her pressed closer, the young woman could only shrink back. But the hand on her waist was hot, as if it would burn her. Even through the thin fabric of her gown, the heat made Irene blush, and she swallowed involuntarily. Derry, the former crown prince, was startled. As the dance momentarily paused, he leaned down and asked, "What are you thinking about, Irene? Why did you just swallow like that?" Infuriated, Irene assumed this was Derry's way of getting back at her. So, she deliberately stepped on his foot with her heel. Derry didn't cry out. If he wanted to win his wife back, he had to endure pain that ordinary men couldn't. But his words were still clumsy. He puffed up his cheeks and demanded, "Irene, can you please not be so childish? You didn't step on Pierre's foot earlier." Irene gave a sly smile. She wouldn't admit it was intentional, offering instead a perfectly official explanation. "I apologize, Your Highness. It's because, well, Pierre is a very skilled dancer. Even if I make a mistake, he can compensate." To tame this unruly little mouth, Derry pressed close, his eyes locked on hers with an earnest gaze. "You're dancing with me, yet your mind is on someone else. What kind of manners are these? Now, you can only look at me." This was the first time Derry had spoken such words, and the embarrassment made his face flush crimson. It was also the first time Irene had seen him so flustered. In the past, he had always been aloof, coldly enjoying her affections. Then, Derry began his accusations. "You slept with me once, Irene. You should take responsibility for me. And why did you feed Pierre? He has hands. He can feed himself." Watching Derry's anger, Irene thought he was being completely unreasonable. Why did he have to criticize her? He hadn't done anything right himself. Irene sighed in exasperation. She couldn't stop the dance now. Everyone was watching them. But Derry continued to complain in her ear. Duchess, you never fed me. Soothing a grumpy puppy was proving to be quite the task. Irene explained wearily. That's because his hand was injured. That's why I fed him. However, Derry refused to accept her explanation. I see. You're just trying to draw a line between us. Well, this is your last taste of freedom anyway. So even if you act up, I'll understand. Last taste of freedom. Irene's heart pounded. What did he mean? Did this man intend to trap her with marriage? The crown prince, before her, actually wanted to bind her with marriage. But she didn't want to be his wife. To choose one tree and give up an entire forest. What a waste. She hadn't even gotten her hands on the loyal white-haired one or the Yandera emperor yet. She politely declined further conversation. As the music ended, so did her dance with Derry. Irene breathed a sigh of relief. But just then, everyone started clapping. Look at them. They're such a perfect match. Even the king, from afar, praised Irene's father. Duke, you must be so proud to have such an outstanding daughter. Irene's beautiful face broke out in a cold sweat. Weren't these people shipping the wrong couple? She wasn't the heroine of this story. It should be Lilia destined to spend her life with the crown prince. Irene's father quickly responded with modesty. You're too kind, your majesty. But the king spoke earnestly to the duke. I believe she would be a magnificent queen. The smiles on both father and daughter's faces froze, their bodies slick with cold sweat. Only Derry, like a blissful fool, beamed beside them. Then another voice of praise chimed in. Seeing the two of them dance like that warms my heart. It was the elegant and dignified queen. Irene curtsied gracefully, but inwardly, she was screaming for help. She really didn't want to be tied to Derry. The royal couple, oblivious to Irene's internal protest, continued to assist their son. By the way, would you like to join me for a meal at the Queen's palace tomorrow? The king and queen seemed incredibly pleased with their prospective daughter-in-law. Irene was sweating bullets. Although she didn't want to become their daughter-in-law, she couldn't refuse the king's invitation. In the end, she had to agree. He was actually a lunatic, but he maintained the facade of a gentle gentleman, all for his unrequited love. When he heard someone speaking ill of his beloved, the man's dark side emerged. He splashed red wine on her, drenching her thoroughly. Watch your tongue, he snarled. The woman, suddenly soaked in wine, immediately launched into a tirade, pointing at Pierre's nose and berating him as a lovesick fool. Pierre smiled and nodded in agreement, but his hand crushed the wine glass in his grip, silently warning the woman to hold her tongue. He dared to act so recklessly because of the stereotypical image of his gentle nature. Even if the woman spread rumors, no one would believe her. Gentle Pierre splashing wine on a woman. It must have been the woman's fault. Sure enough, when the onlookers arrived, they immediately accused the woman of lying. Pierre clutched his chest, feigning remorse. I'm so sorry. It's all my fault for making you angry. With a few words, Pierre turned the tables, painting a picture of a drunken woman harassing a noble knight. Pierre gallantly offered his handkerchief. Your dress is wet. If you stay like this, you might catch a cold. Let me escort you back. The woman was furious. Despite being in the wrong, she continued to call Pierre a liar. But the onlookers sided against her. This entire spectacle unfolded before Lilia's eyes, completely changing her perception of Pierre. When she saw Pierre again later, her interest was piqued. She brought up the incident, and Pierre immediately switched to a chastised child mode. Such superb acting. What a sly fox. Absolutely adorable. Lilia agreed to attend the tea party with Pierre. The excitement on Pierre's face was unconcealed. He then practically skipped out of the palace. Lilia watched him from the second floor. He paused under a street lamp. He seemed to remember their date and excitedly pumped his fist, practically jumping for joy. Lilia chuckled. A single date could make him that happy. He was surprisingly love-struck. Derry gazed longingly at Irene's retreating figure. He still couldn't understand why she had broken up with him. The next second, he and Irene swapped bodies. Both, with uncanny synchronicity, immediately sought each other out. What's going on? They exclaimed in unison. Sparks flew between them. As expected of former lovers, even the angle and timing of their head turns were identical. But the most pressing matter was finding a way to switch back. Irene suddenly remembered that in the original story, Their first night together was supposed to be uneventful. So why was it so passionate after he transmigrated? And Derry's attitude had clearly improved. He was still unaware of the events that were about to unfold, events that would deliver a powerful psychological blow. Irene stared at Derry. Last time they swapped bodies, it was because of physical contact. Your Highness, should we try that again? She wondered, not waiting for Derry's response. She pulled off his glove and took his hand. This is my own body, she thought, and I need someone else to hold my own hand. But she had to admit his hand was incredibly soft. The moment their hands touched, Irene felt Derry's heart practically leap out of his throat. Oh no, this is the feeling of falling in love. She recoiled as if electrocuted, turning away awkwardly. Her heart continued to race, and her face burned. Irene was shocked. Just holding hands could provoke such a reaction in Derry's body. As an expert in avoiding romance, Irene was incredibly uncomfortable with this sweet, tingling sensation. Dead people shouldn't fall in love. Focus on building a beautiful china. She had to switch back quickly. Suppressing the fluttering in her chest, Irene grabbed Derry's hand again. Derry, completely oblivious to the secret his honest body had betrayed, was puzzled by Irene's unusual behavior. Suddenly, a familiar sensation washed over them, and they switched back. Irene clung to Derry, complaining, Your Highness, what did you do to me that made us swap bodies? Derry's face flushed crimson. Irene smirked. Now you know what that inexplicable heart fluttering feels like. She asked Derry if he had slept with another woman, since they had swapped bodies after their night together. Derry tightened his grip on Irene's shoulders, vehemently declaring his loyalty. He only wanted Irene and would never touch another woman. What's it like to swap bodies with your crush? A man who normally wouldn't dare speak to a girl now grabbed a mirror and, gazing at the reflection, gushed, "Oh my God, she's so beautiful." His maid looked at him, bewildered. "Miss, when did you become so narcissistic?" The man coughed awkwardly. The maid quickly reported, "Miss, Killian is here to see you." So his crush had other men in her life besides him. He begrudgingly received Killian, who, to his surprise, familiarly called him sister and nuzzled his head against Derry's thigh. "Sister, I've suffered so much. Please caress me, kiss me." This completely startled the straight-laced Derry. Had Irene really caressed and kissed him? She had done these things to another man besides him. Fury burned in Derry's chest. He glared at the boy. Get to the point. Killian's grayish-brown eyes, evidence of his mixed heritage from the enemy nation, hinted at his magical abilities. So, he must be Irene's accomplice. They must have used magic to switch his body. Killian smiled. I've discovered some suspicious activity at Grand Duke Cadwin's estate. Derry was stunned. How did this kid know about Grand Duke Cadwin? Imitating Irene's coy demeanor, he asked, "When did you hear about this?" Derry's months of living with Irene allowed him to perfectly mimic her. Killian, completely unsuspecting, revealed everything about the hideout on 3rd Street. Derry memorized the location, a predatory grin spreading across his face. After using Killian, he would discard him. Derry seethed with irritation. What was so good about that pretty boy that Irene would kiss and hug him? He, the crown prince, couldn't even hold her hand. Was it because he hadn't satisfied her that night? Derry recalled hearing that the first night had to be passionate. So, was the problem that he had suppressed his desires? Fortunately, fate had given him another chance. They had swapped bodies again. To switch back, they needed intimate contact. This time, he would erase the shame and reclaim his masculine pride. What a divine curse. Not only could you swap bodies with your loved one, but only physical contact could reverse it. The narrator is blushing just thinking about it. Tag the person you want to swap bodies with in the comments below. To switch back, Derry had to be intimate with Irene once more. This time, he was determined to completely conquer Irene with his prowess. These past few months had clarified his feelings entirely. He loved only Irene. Derry cupped Irene's head and kissed her deeply. Lost in a moment, he didn't hear her calling his name. Irene had to grab Derry's hand and push him away. Did you forget something? Derry suddenly remembered and dutifully swallowed the contraceptive pill. Because every second of this night was precious, Derry swallowed the pill without even chewing. Then, he eagerly returned to savoring Irene's sweetness. The following events are not suitable for viewing, so we'll skip ahead. After his exertions, Derry felt quite pleased with himself. He replayed the cheesy lines he'd uttered earlier, nodding in satisfaction. Maybe when Irene woke up, she would agree to become the crown princess. How many children should they have? Perhaps they should wait. He still wanted to enjoy their sweet life together, just the two of them. Irene was completely unaware of Derry's plans for their future. Derry gazed lovingly at her sleeping face, brushing a stray strand of hair away from her cheek. Red hair would definitely look beautiful with a white veil. Her hair was as soft as silk, reminding Derry of a puppy he had as a child. The puppy had kept him company during his dark days as a hostage, but it had died in his arms after drinking poisoned soup from his table. Just then, Irene woke up. "Your Highness, why are you looking at me like that?" Under the dim light, Derry shamelessly studied Irene's face. What a captivating beauty she was. Even her sleepy voice made his heart flutter. "Should I be honest about my feelings?" He accidentally blurted out his inner thoughts. "I think I like a dog I once had." This hopelessly dense man, looking at the woman he'd just spent the night with, uttered what he thought were deeply affectionate words. "I feel like you're like a dog I used to have." He even shyly rubbed his nose after saying it. Irene was so moved that she wanted to strangle this blockhead. What did she have in common with the dog? Derry explained that the dog he had once owned had red fur. Irene, with her own red hair, clenched her fists. Meanwhile, Derry was lost in his memories. That dog had been his companion during his dark childhood, but had been poisoned at the dinner table after drinking all of his soup. Irene felt a pang of sympathy for him. Little Derry, sent to the Empire as a hostage, must have been terrified watching his beloved dog die in front of him after drinking poison meant for him. Derry, not wanting to show vulnerability in front of his beloved, abruptly turned away. He was a foolish creature who didn't value his own life. Don't think about it anymore. This attempt at appearing strong made Irene's heart ache even more. Perhaps he did not value his life, but rather felt that giving his life for you was worthwhile. Derry's eyes widened. Irene's words hit him like a hammer. He stared at Irene, lost in thought. Receiving no response, Irene turned back to the pillows in annoyance. She had tried to be tender with him, but Derry was so clueless. This frustratingly dense man. Meanwhile, the dense Derry was completely head over heels. He had expected Irene to flee from his vulnerability, but instead, she had shown such compassion. Derry's heart pounded in his chest. What was happening to him? Had Irene bewitched him? He was oblivious to the fact that his beloved was fuming beside him because of his denseness. When Irene woke up and found the bed beside her empty, her anger flared. She walked into the living room, rubbing her damp hair, and found Derry had ordered a table full of food. Such a lavish breakfast. Had Derry ordered everything on the menu just to please her? Irene picked up a piece of bread, but Derry stared at her with a menacing look and walked towards her with a knife. What was going on? Was he going to kill her because she had entered the living room with her left foot first? Just as Irene was about to run, Derry raised the knife and attacked the steak beside her plate. He carefully cut the steak for her and haughtily ordered her to eat more. "Your stamina is too weak. It's frustrating when I'm in your body." Unable to bear his intense gaze, Irene focused on her food. After breakfast, Derry boasted, "If you become my crown princess, you can eat like this every day." Humph. This doting older brother, simply wanting to cheer up his younger sister, had inadvertently ruined her plans and delivered her into the hands of another man. Irene had been wondering why they were still switching bodies, even though the curse had been lifted. Then she saw a list, and her brother's name was clearly written on it. It turned out her brother, seeing her unhappiness, had prepared a special potion to soothe her. The mandrake root in the potion, however, happened to alter the magic within Derry. This meant all of Irene's previous efforts had been in vain. Her clueless brother, still wanting credit, asked, "So, how do you feel after drinking it?" Refreshed. He then saw Irene's tears of disappointment. Her brother panicked and knelt down to comfort her. He didn't know that Irene, in order to lift Derry's curse, had repeatedly ingested small doses of poison. His well-meaning gesture had completely undone all her hard work. Her brother held her in his arms, soothing her like a child, but seeing no improvement, he resorted to his ultimate weapon. The teddy bear was a birthday gift from Irene to her brother. Had he kept it with him all this time? Irene closed her eyes in exasperation. She grabbed the bear and furiously ripped its head off, taking her frustration out on the plush toy as if it were her dense brother. After tossing the mangled bear back to him, Irene spun around and stormed off. The sight of her brother's innocent face only fueled her anger. Damn it, this was all his fault. Suddenly, strong arms scooped her up. It was her brother who had chased after her. Seeing her pale face, he gently pressed his forehead against hers. You're burning up. Let me take you back to your room. Mortified, Irene struggled to get down, but her brother only held her tighter. Don't worry, everyone will just think we're close siblings. He carried her through the castle, oblivious to the envious glances of the servants. Irene buried her face in her hands. This was so embarrassing. Her brother, however, remained unfazed. I'll take care of you. I became a doctor for you, after all. As for why I made you angry, can you scold me after you've recovered? It was true that Irene had been frail and sickly since childhood. Her brother had become the royal physician to better care for her. Thinking about it, he was innocent in this whole ordeal. Looking at her kind brother, the knot of frustration in Irene's chest dissipated. She rested her head against his chest. Just moments ago, she had wanted to pull out all his hair. This was a complete mess. On one side, the Tsundere crown prince, Derry, succinctly threatened, "Come to the palace for a date in 2 weeks, or I'll kiss you to death." On the other, the manipulative knight, Pierre, delivered a classic line of faux concern. "I'd like to invite you to a party, but if you're busy, don't feel obligated to attend. If it were you, which would you choose?" Irene naturally declared she'd have both. Then, under the amused gazes of her brothers, she accepted the extravagant jewel from the crown prince and the invitation from the manipulative knight. She knew the shy, nervous act the knight put on, the facade of a pure and innocent young man, was all a performance. But since the manipulative man was putting on a show, she was happy to play along. Little did she know, she had earned someone's resentment. A woman gnawed on her fingernails, seething with jealousy. She had heard Irene had given up on the crown prince and had been looking forward to seeing her heart broken. Instead, Irene had turned around and attended the banquet, radiant and hand in hand with the knight. And to add insult to injury, the crown prince, who had previously ignored her, was now pursuing Irene. As the villain of the story, this woman couldn't just stand by and watch them get married and have children. So, she came up with a traditional and effective plan: have another woman seduce Derry. This exceptionally beautiful woman was the accomplice she had found. The woman falsely claimed that Warren was a distant relative of her husband and deliberately brought her to Derry at a party. She looked back and forth between them with satisfaction. With Warren's beautiful face, she was sure to be a match for Irene. Look at the oblivious crown prince staring at Warren's face. This was definitely going to work. The woman employed a strategy of playing hard to get. First, she had Warren briefly appear before Derry. Then, when Derry's interest was piqued, she would invite him to the Grand Duke's mansion, creating an opportunity for them to be alone. But Derry wasn't interested. He stared intently at Warren only because he felt she resembled the pretty boy around Irene. Not only their hair and eyes, but even the aura of danger around them was identical. So, Derry ordered his aide to thoroughly investigate everything about Warren and her connection to Irene. He wanted to know it all. As for visiting the Grand Duke's mansion, who had time for that? He was busy pursuing his wife. The lovesick puppy dejectedly plucked petals from a flower. Irene loves me. She loves me not. In his quest for the answer he desired, he plucked petals all night, leaving the vase full of bare stems. When the servant entered, they found the crown prince asleep in a sea of petals, surrounded by a pile of denuded stems. For that woman, has our esteemed crown prince gone mad? But Derry's unusual behavior was actually due to something the messenger, who had delivered the invitation the previous night, had said. Miss Irene was crying. Derry had completely panicked. The indomitable crown prince Derry had only one weakness: Irene's tears. When Irene cried, Derry was defeated. He had agonized over it all night. Why had Irene been crying? Was it because he hadn't satisfied her that night? Irene, the person in question, would have said she was quite satisfied, but could he please stop thinking about that sort of thing? Derry began to replay the events and every word spoken that night. I boldly complimented Irene, saying she was like a puppy, that she was cute, and that I wanted to pet her. Such cheesy lines. But now that he thought about it, Irene hadn't looked happy at the time. His masculine pride wounded once more, Derry sulked like a drowned rat. He had plucked all the flowers bare and hadn't slept all night, divining whether Irene liked him or not. It was unheard of for Derry to display such heartbroken despair. Just what kind of woman was she? Even his ministers couldn't help but offer their counsel. You mustn't be swayed by beauty. You must be a wise emperor. Derry had had enough of these hypocritical noblemen. He glared at them. Because of your schemes, I was a hostage in the empire for years. I'm showing mercy by not snapping your necks right now. "What more do you want from me?" The ministers retreated, shamefaced. Only then did Derry realize he had lost his composure. He clenched the bare stem in his hand. Damn it, why did he lose control whenever it came to Irene? And does flower petal divination really work? These scheming siblings had fallen for the same woman, the saintess of their empire. Her innocence and kindness were all an act. The knight of their empire. His gentlemanly and refined demeanor was also a facade. These siblings were, in essence, a pair of master manipulators. They hid their true nature to win this woman's heart. The younger sister, upon attending her coming-of-age ceremony, fell in love with Irene at first sight. From that day forward, she feigned innocence, constantly hovering around Irene. She even went so far as to paint the hair of the queens and goddesses in her books red to match Irene's. The older brother, meanwhile, had been lurking by Irene's side since childhood, acting as her loyal knight. To create more opportunities to be with her, the two siblings specifically organized a party and invited Irene. Before Irene even arrived, the brother had already slipped into his role. Hearing her brother's affected voice, the younger sister's skin crawled. She suggested that her brother take this opportunity to seduce Irene. Irene had been pursuing the crown prince before. Perhaps she liked men who were like wild beasts. The scheming brother, for the first time, blushed. While his kindness was fake, his innocence was genuine. At the thought of seducing the woman he loved, the brother could barely walk. But his legs, honest as ever, carried him towards the dressing room. Having sent her brother off, the younger sister, under the pretext of showing Irene around, seized the opportunity to monopolize her. Hearing Irene call her name, the younger sister was so moved she almost cried. Irene had always been cold to her before. Now, she was calling her name so easily. Sob. Irene was the best woman in the world. But the younger sister didn't forget her agreement with her brother. She led Irene to the prearranged location. The brother had changed into a white shirt, unbuttoning the top 3 buttons to reveal his well-built chest. The innocent brother felt incredibly awkward. Would this really attract Irene's attention? Would she think he was immoral? The answer was obvious. Irene was completely captivated. She subconsciously swallowed, thinking he was being far too formal wearing so many clothes. Seeing her brother, the younger sister smiled and threw herself into his arms, using the opportunity to exchange information. His Highness, the Crown Prince, is also here. I'll go distract him. You focus on seducing her. Then, she slipped away under some pretense, creating space for the two of them to be alone. This was the power of sibling cooperation. To capture the heart of their goddess, the scheming knight disguised himself as an innocent puppy. He complained about the heat, while unbuttoning 3 more buttons on his shirt and artfully tousling his hair, subtly showing off his perfect physique. Irene was thoroughly enjoying the show. She had to fan herself furiously to hide the heat rising in her cheeks. Fountain water splashed onto Pierre's face, prompting him to lift his entire shirt, innocently wiping his damp hair. Who could resist such a cunning, yet innocent, beautiful man? Irene surrendered on the spot. This notoriously proper gentleman wouldn't normally take his clothes off in front of others. Could it be that Pierre was trying to seduce her? The thought made Irene's heart race. The two shyly exchanged glances, then quickly looked away. Irene inwardly cursed Derry. It was all his fault for personally teaching her that kind of knowledge, making her so suspicious. Pierre covered his face with his thin shirt. He had done that just to make Irene see him as a man. He must be crazy. But seeing Irene's reaction, he couldn't help but pull his collar even lower. To ease the tension, Irene suggested they go look at the hyacinths. As a result, she slipped and fell into Pierre's arms. It would be a crime not to do something in this moment. Irene's heart pounded. She subconsciously closed her eyes, but when she opened them again, she saw herself embraced in Pierre's arms. She had switched bodies with Derry again. Had Derry been secretly watching them all along? Seeing her intimate contact with Pierre, he had crushed a pillar in his rage. At that moment, Lilia walked over. I won't help you anymore. Irene doesn't love you anymore. I support my brother and Irene being together. Irene was stunned. She quickly pieced together the meaning of Lilia's words. It meant that Derry had accepted Lilia's help to pursue her. But in the original story, he was supposed to be in love with Lilia. This was all too coincidental. Irene decided to test her about the necklace. Back then, Derry had given her the necklace that Lilia had rejected. Could there be more to the story? Under questioning, Lilia revealed the truth. It turned out that the necklace was something Derry had carefully chosen for Irene after consulting Lilia. From the very beginning, Derry only had eyes for her. This was a huge misunderstanding. He was an idiot. He had seen his fiancée embracing another man with his own eyes. But the next second, he had switched bodies with his fiancée, suddenly seeing a man's face inches from his own. Derry's face contorted like he was constipated. The man above him was looking at him affectionately, wanting to kiss him. The straight man trapped inside was so disgusted he wanted to vomit. He had just been thinking about kicking his rival away. But of all times, he had to switch bodies then. And what was with this guy's dazed and blissful expression? His shirt buttons, he'd undone 3 of them. How sly. But why was this woman's heart pounding? Could it be that Irene was enjoying this embrace too? Although Derry wanted to close his eyes and escape, that would be the same as giving Pierre the chance to kiss him. Absolutely not. Even if his eyeballs dried out to the point of agony, he couldn't close his eyes. Pierre didn't know the woman in his arms was now a man. Seeing the look of repulsion on Irene's face, Pierre could only sigh and release her like the gentleman he pretended to be. "My apologies," he murmured to his supposed rival. Derry, however, glared at him, mistaking the release for a manipulative tactic. Suddenly, Irene, who had switched back into her own body, appeared, interrupting their bizarre interaction. "I need to speak with the Duke's daughter," she announced. "I'd appreciate it if you would leave us for a moment." Irene led Derry to a secluded spot under a tree. Through physical contact, they temporarily switched back. Only after returning to his own body did Derry understand. Irene hadn't been surprised by the body swap. Instead, her heart had raced because of Pierre's blatant seduction. If he hadn't intervened, they might have kissed. The thought alone was infuriating. He grabbed Irene's hand. "Pierre definitely has ulterior motives towards you." Irene blinked in confusion. "Damn it, do you really not see his scheming? If he didn't have ulterior motives, why would he undo 3 buttons? Clearly, men understood men best." Irene, however, countered, "Your Majesty, do you dislike me being with Pierre?" The question caught him off guard. He stammered, still holding her hand, trying to answer. But Irene had already pulled her hand away. The instant their hands separated, they switched bodies again. This time, it was Irene's turn to feel the other's racing heart. Could it be that his words about returning to their original bodies had reminded him of that night? Or was Pierre up to something? Wasn't he the same? Furious, Irene grabbed his hand again. This body swapping was getting out of control. They could only maintain their handhold to keep their souls in the right bodies. Damn it. Switching bodies with the girl he had a crush on was already tragic enough. He never expected he'd also have to experience her period for her. Derry curled up in bed in agony. He'd been inexplicably moody these past few days, craving sweets, and his stomach felt like it was about to explode. Derry, a man of steel, had only heard of periods, but he never imagined it would be this painful. His face was pale. Damn it, how did Irene survive this every month? Derry felt so wretched he could barely take 2 steps without the maid support. It felt like a dam was constantly bursting between his legs. Painkillers didn't help. He wrote to Irene to complain, but she replied coldly. Derry lay in bed, feeling wronged. For some reason, his body felt like it had been poisoned, incredibly heavy. But as a noble lady, she couldn't possibly do anything foolish. This was Derry's first experience with the power of a period. He secretly vowed that once they switched back, he would give Irene some health-boosting pills. The only comfort was that he could spare her this pain. Just then, the maid brought over the book Irene usually read during her period. Derry flipped through it with a smile, then froze in shock. It was filled with images that should have been censored. Derry's innocent heart received a critical hit. Why did Irene collect such pictures? Moreover, some of the positions were physically impossible for humans, and she had even made annotations as if studying them. Derry slammed the book shut and hastily dismissed the maid. After seeing those eye-searing images, he felt even dizzier. Wait a minute. Judging by the handwriting in the book, it looked like Irene had made it herself. But would Irene leave that kind of book in a public space where anyone could touch it? Unless she had a secret space. That would explain everything. Why he swapped bodies with Irene, why Irene's body showed symptoms of poisoning. After some searching, he found a hidden door. He pushed the door open. Of all times, they swapped bodies again at this critical moment. The crown prince, whom billions of girls dreamed of marrying, had switched bodies with a girl. Facing the soft, beautiful woman who lunged at him, the crown prince laughed heartily. Being a man was pretty great. He admired the beauty before him until the person beside him started chattering with deductions. Only then did Irene realize this was a trap set specifically for the Crown Prince, designed to seduce him. She didn't know the Crown Prince's body now housed a woman's soul. But this tactic was quite effective on Irene, who wouldn't enjoy being close to a beautiful woman. Then Irene's gaze fell on the woman's tightly laced corset. As a woman herself, she knew the dress created a perfect figure, but it must be difficult to breathe in such a tight garment. But men wouldn't care about such things. They only cared about their own objectives. The man gave Irene a lewd smile. "If your highness is willing," he purred, "you can spend the night in bed with this child." His laughter grew more unrestrained. How dazzling her essence must be at night. Irene's stomach churned at his words. She glared at the man with disgust. "As a Grand Duke, you're incredibly vulgar. Have some shame." If she weren't in Derry's body, she would have kicked him between the legs. Irene turned away dismissively, but the beautiful woman followed, inviting her to sit on a nearby bench. Irene's earlier words had touched her deeply. Irene stared at the luminous face. Time was running out, but it was hard to refuse. The beautiful woman tucked her hair behind her ear, revealing her delicate neck. "To please your highness," she confessed, I dressed up specially. I wonder if it's a bit too much." "Not all. It suits you perfectly." Irene's inner self was practically drooling. The beauty before him was utterly captivating, almost enough to turn him. But why, despite being in a male body, was there no physical reaction? This clueless, oblivious straight man. Irene asked the woman to turn around. He loosened the laces at the back of her corset. "You're already beautiful," he murmured, easing the tightly bound garment. "There's no need to make yourself uncomfortable just to please me." Still a man's body, Irene politely turned away. "I'm not going to undo anymore," he said, "so you can adjust it yourself." The woman behind him finally breathed freely. Recalling Irene's gentle touch, she blushed. Though he was the emperor of the underground dark web, he was willing to grovel at this woman's feet. To aid his sister, he disguised himself as a shoemaker, secretly infiltrating his sister's residence to provide her with information. Irene seemed so happy, treating him like a precious jewel, holding his foot, taking measurements for someone else's shoes. Hades's eyes held infinite sorrow. This wasn't happiness, but pain. His beloved was so close, yet he could only be her brother. Agony. Composing himself, Hades said, "Did you know? Knee-high boots will be fashionable this autumn." Hades's hand, holding the measuring tape, slowly moved upwards. "Sister will look stunning in long boots." Irene smiled gently. "Careful, or I'll strangle you with this tape measure. Don't push your luck." Even her threats are elegant. Such a perfect sister, yet bound to that foolish man. To help his sister break the curse, Hades had been tirelessly investigating, finally finding a way to lift it without involving the one who cast it. The solution was the Dragon Slayer sword, forged from the rib of a divine dragon, imbued with Derry's will. It was the only weapon capable of breaking Derry's curse. But only someone with the resolve to sacrifice themselves could be chosen by the sword. Although Derry had successfully summoned the Dragon Slayer sword, he couldn't draw it. Hades clicked his tongue in frustration. Every day, the curse lingered. His sister remained entangled with Derry. Furthermore, the Tower Lord's son also had his eye on the sword. Time was running out. Just then, a maid approached, carrying a chest, supposedly containing documents about imperial attire. The chest actually held information about the curse. Feigning nonchalance, Irene passed the documents to Hades, disguised as a dressmaker. After they left, Irene breathed a sigh of relief. Next on the agenda, dinner with Derry's mother. The young man shyly extended an invitation to the woman. Such innocence, all an act. He was actually incredibly cunning. But women loved innocent, loyal types. So he played the part, innocently undoing his shirt buttons, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights, gazing at her expectantly. "Would you join me for the monster hunt?" he asked, under the man's relentless charm offensive. Irene almost succumbed. The annual monster hunt was, in reality, a large-scale matchmaking event. Vigorous young dukes competed to capture monsters, impressing potential partners, sometimes even leading to marriage. Pierre's intentions were clear. Just as Irene was about to answer, a large figure abruptly wedged himself between them, separating them. Derry, with a straight face, declared, "You're blocking my way." Irene was stunned by his audacity. The area was incredibly spacious. And why was he dressed so flamboyantly, like a preening peacock? Irene curtsied, preparing to leave for the palace, but Derry stopped her. "I'm walking," he announced. His haughty expression betrayed his intentions. He clearly just wanted to spend more time with Irene. Before leaving, he couldn't resist a jab at his rival. I'll be participating in a monster hunt as well. Seeing Pierre's knowing look, Derry immediately glared back, bristling like a cat. Yes, I will be participating. Does that offend you? Pierre responded with polite platitudes, but his eyes were icy. As the saying goes, when rivals meet, their eyes flash fire. Their conversation seemed civil, but sparks flew beneath the surface. Irene, caught in the middle, tried to escape, but was stopped again. Who are you going with? Logically, going with Derry was the best way to manage their unpredictable body swaps. However, Pierre was looking at her with pleading eyes, and he had extended the invitation first. Torn, Irene was about to use her brother as an excuse when the ever-thoughtful Pierre offered a solution. We'll all be there anyway. We can decide then. Seeing the grateful look in Irene's eyes, Pierre knew he'd achieved his goal. She hadn't publicly rejected him, and he'd even earned some brownie points. The cunning man inwardly preened, bowing politely. As expected, there's nothing a charming, manipulative man can't achieve.